There we go.
Hello there. It's Sean B.W. Parker for Empowering the Innocent TV, and we're here today talking to Mr. Jared Whitaker, who's author and a men's rights activist and a very active person on social media, and we're very excited to get to know him. So, hi, Jared. Would you like to introduce yourself in a couple of sentences?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, so for me, I'll give a bit of an overview of how I got to where I am within this world of men's rights and writing about it. So I was always in the corporate world before. I was 20 years. I actually ended up being CEO of a software company, and I was the victim of domestic abuse, and kind of went through everything: domestic abuse, false allegations, severe abuse. And I kind of was thinking about my life and thought, well, you know what? I've always wanted to write. That's actually what my dream was. I just kind of got pulled into the corporate world. I have a voice and can actually stand up and talk about things for people who can't talk about them because I know how hard it can be, especially for guys. And I thought, you know what? I'm a particularly large man. So if I can do it and stand up and tell my story, it might help other people who think, well, if this guy can do it, we can do it as well. So yeah, I've canned the corporate world and I started writing books I say for men, but it's actually for everyone because it's about men. It's about domestic abuse against men, about false allegations, things like that. But these are books that need to be read by everyone, men, women alike, because it's affecting men, but it's affecting families, it's affecting mothers and daughters and sisters, etc. So yeah, I've written 5 books on the topic of domestic abuse, false allegations, and actually, literally earlier today, finished my 6th book. It just needs to be edited and formatted, etc. So it will be out next year.
Well, that's good news. Good timing for us. Lovely.
Yep.
Um, you talked about kind of coming from the corporate world. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more, just to give us even a bit more good grounding on it?
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting to me now. I mean, I kind of started my life in project management and kind of got into it by accident, really. Um, Not what I studied. I actually studied in Manchester and I did a degree in maths and a degree in English. And what I wanted to do was write. But kind of got pulled into it. I moved after studying in Manchester. I moved back to South Africa, where I'm from, and was working there. Project management, got promoted, kind of moved up the ranks through. I was working in banks and large financial providers. Moved back to the UK in 2018 and was working in London for ages. And yeah, it just wasn't. It didn't sit right with me, and with everything that was happening to me and did happen to me, it just kind of it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I moved on, and it's interesting to me now, looking back at the corporate world, how much work is actually required there from this point of view of understanding domestic abuse against men, understanding things like parental alienation, false allegations. Because I still remember days, showing up at work with a broken wrist, showing up at work with fractured ribs, and no one even batting an eyelid to these things. Like, oh, what happened? Oh, I had a football accident. Oh, okay. Well, you're the worst football player in the world because you've had accidents, every week. Oh, you've taken time off. You stressed about this. Never anyone saying what's going on. It just was never a thing that crossed anyone in the corporate world's mind that this could be something that happened to a guy, particularly. I don't know how good the work is for women either, but yeah, I think just when it comes to men in the corporate world, you're kind of expected to be this, you know, monstrous like Tyrannosaurus that eats everyone in their path, and you know, it climbs the corporate ladder, and but yeah, it's just not reality.
Wow, that's so compelling. You talk about kind of going into work and being covered in bruises and things like in a fight club sort of
Yeah,
scenario where it's all your choice and you've gone and done that.
yeah.
But obviously, as we know from your writings, there's something different going on at home. Did any of that turn into legalities, or was it is it just more of a personal thing, or anything you can talk about with that?
Yeah, so there were legalities involved and lots of things. Obviously, I've been to court about I don't know, probably 30 or 40 times it feels like by now for various things, non-molestation orders and divorce proceedings and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, so turned into legalities. Obviously, in the case of domestic abuse, there are no legalities there. But I mean, I remember the first time I actually did go to the police, they laughed at me and said, "Come on, you must be joking." And I think that's
Wow.
looking at me, my size versus I'm 6'2" and I weigh about 125 kilograms, and I do like strongman training and things like that. So looking at me, you would never think I'm the typical victim, but there's no such thing, and that's what people don't understand. There is no such thing as a typical victim. It doesn't matter what you are, man, woman, short, tall, thin, fat. You know, it doesn't make a difference. It's about power. It's not about size or gender or anything. So yeah, I remember a couple after me. When I actually got what started my getting free from it all was I got arrested, um,
Hmm.
and it was because she beat me again. And eventually I said, I've had enough. I'm calling the police. I can't do this anymore. And I literally, I remember the day. I remember all the details perfectly because I had planned my suicide for the next day, basically. Um, and I was thinking about this happened. I said I'm going to call the police. I went to get my phone, and as I went to get my phone, she picked up her phone, which she had, and called the police. Said, "Help! Help! My husband's attacked me." They came, arrested me, obviously, because I'm the guy, um, and took me in. And I was in the cells, all day. They called me in late at night, like 11 o'clock or something, to do the interview. I was purple, bruises everywhere, scratched, whatever. They even said, "Oh, we've interviewed her and there's not a mark on her." I'm like, "Yeah, because I didn't do anything. It's her did it to me."
Right.
And they took pictures and things like that. And they literally spent about 3 hours in that police interrogation room trying to make it me. And I'm like, I'm standing here bruised. What do you think? I beat myself up. And like, um, yeah, and eventually they realized, okay, they weren't getting anywhere, so they just threw me out in the middle of the night, in the middle of winter, no coat, nothing, threw me out, and I ended up walking the streets for about 4 or 5 hours until local Sainsbury's opened up in the morning where I could go in and get some food.
Oh, no wonder you're so passionate about everything. Not that
Yeah,
there's any reason not to
yeah,
be. That's incredible, Jared.
it's a joke, and you know what? The really sad thing is you would think something like this is like a, oh my God, this is such a terrible story. This must be like a anomaly. Nah, this is what happened. I've spoken to a million men with the same story. Every guy I talk to. I, sadly enough, and I won't mention any names or details. I literally had coffee earlier with a mate I haven't seen in most of this year. Literally just had coffee to catch up. He's in an abusive relationship now, and he's really struggling. And just so
Oh,
happened, and we had a chat, and it's just the epidemic.
um, terribly sorry for him, of course. Hello, if he's watching. Um, how do you what what sort of impact do you think that the Johnny Depp Amber Heard sort of trial had? Obviously, that was a couple of years after your experience, it sounds like, or perhaps concurrent. Um, that's changed people's minds, hasn't it? It's opened people's eyes, at least, whichever side you're on, don't you think?
Yeah, look, it opened. I wouldn't say it opened my eyes because obviously I'd gone through it myself. But what it did do, and if I ever do get to meet him one day, I'll say thank you. Is it's what started me talking because I thought, well, hang on, exactly what I'm saying. I saw someone who's meant to be powerful, and he's a celebrity, and he's famous, and he's talking about it openly and honestly, and it gave me the power to do that. So it did that for me, and I think it was good and it was out there. Unfortunately, there's obviously a lot of immensely negative things out there about it as well, where you've got the Amber Heard army on social media. Just it's they don't want to have a debate. They want to attack. But yeah,
Mm,
I think it was good. I think it's the first case where a celebrity spoken up and kind of been believed as a man. And funnily enough, the book I finished writing today is all about misandry throughout the world and various forms about it. And I've listed various examples of other celebrities that have spoken up about things and just been vilified and attacked for speaking up about it. So Johnny Depp was
mm,
kind of the first one to get that global support, if you like. He had a lot of support, and a lot of people still support him.
yeah, yeah. It was a fascinating sort of time, which did seem to turn things for this sort of this decade, where things are much more evenly balanced out there. I mean, it's not that they're evenly balanced. There's misandry everywhere,
Yeah,
and of course, lots of the feminists say there's still lots of misogyny,
yeah,
which there might be, but it's so much more complex than that now, and at least that's been exposed a little bit.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that's all that. And I think you called me at the beginning. I think you called me a men's rights activist, and actually, I'd say I'm a equal rights activist. But it just so happens that my speciality is talking about the stuff happening to men. But what I'm
Yeah.
after is equality for men and women. I don't want men to be better than women. I don't want men to have more than women. I want men to have what women have, which is equality, not you know.
That's so interesting, because that's what I when people hear you talking about this subject, they go to men's rights as if it's a swear word, because it's been
Yeah,
painted that way by and I say what you say, or I did a couple of years ago. If I cared about the question, I don't care about it anymore. I don't really
yeah,
get it. But men's rights activists, you kind of go a bit, oh, I'm not an extremist. I don't hate women. None of that going on.
yeah,
I just want equality, And I think a lot of people in the mainstream, because anybody listening to us right now, I'm not going to look at it and go, Christ, look at those two extremists.
yeah,
They'll be going, look, listen to these very rational, normal men trying to vocalize about something that's actually seriously going on, aren't they?
Well, I think anyone normal will look at it exactly like that and think, "Oh, these guys are just talking and they, being rational, reasonable." And then you'll have these uh, extreme feminists looking at us, going, "Ah, they must die, and men are terrible." And no matter what comes out of our mouths, they're just going to say that anyway, so it doesn't make a difference.
It's the wrong narrative, exactly.
Yeah,
And once they do enough of that, and I say they, there's lots of men involved in doing that as well.
yeah,
Once they do enough of it, the tags don't matter anymore. When you use the racist or abuser or facilitator or any of those terms enough, you just stop caring, and that's a bit of a problem for the antagonists, because
yeah,
I consider myself to be post-label. I don't know about you, and
yeah. I have a very simple rule in life: don't be a scumbag. You know, doesn't matter if you're a man, a woman, whatever. Just don't be a scumbag. If a man abuses a woman, he's a scumbag. If a woman abuses a man, they're a scumbag. It doesn't make a difference to me. Just be nice.
of course, of course. Which kind of brings me on to another thing I wanted to ask you about. The word in culture swimming about is narcissism. People chuck it at the other, men to women, women to man generally. I'm sure lots of gay people do it to each other too.
Yeah,
And the thing is, it occurs to me that people just call it that to other people when they don't like them and don't agree with them, and they think they're trying to control them. But the other one says exactly the same about the other.
yeah,
Um, so I don't think it's a female or a male thing. Do you agree with that? Or
yeah. No, no. It's definitely not a gender thing. Every single person on the planet has narcissistic traits, right? Everyone has some narcissistic traits. It doesn't mean you're a terrible, horrible person. What narcissists that we, refer to people as what we think are these evil, schemers that are out to, abuse you, is a malignant narcissist, and they have those traits where they are actively looking to harm people. But I mean, you get people like somatic narcissism, which is you're very vain, and you put gym pictures on the internet because you want people to like, the fact that you just did something cool at gym or whatever. And that's, I mean, how common is that nowadays? And it doesn't mean you're a terrible person, but it's when you have
hmm,
malignant narcissism that you are exhibit traits that are actively wanting to harm other people or have no empathy or, don't care about anyone except yourself. That's the problem. And you're right, it's such a overused word that people don't even understand what they're saying, and they say narcissist when they basically mean, oh, someone did something I didn't like. And if you've ever been with or met a real narcissist, a malignant narcissist, you'll know it's like being with the devil.
yeah, yeah, and they get given the tag sort of narcissistic personality disorder, I
Yeah,
presume, if it gets too
yeah,
chronic, uh,
yeah.
as an extension of that.
Easy way to point out one of these people is if you're in a relationship with one, they'll tell you you're a narcissist. That's always how it works. They'll preempt and tell you you're a narcissist because they're trying to cover themselves.
That's exactly what I meant, isn't it?
Yeah,
And that seems to relate back to the business model that the social media platforms have, which are binary. They earn more money the more we hate each other, right? And the
yeah,
more arguments can happen, depth heard. So it's like he says she's a narcissist, she says she's, and if you and your pals go out for a drink, your pals aren't going to call you a narcissist. They might call her that, and her pals
Yeah.
will then call you that, maybe, right? And
Yeah.
that is is so far away from what a judge mind should be, which is balance and because we have to be judge mind all the time on social
Yeah.
media to try and get to the truth of things, and then you get called beige or boring or dinosaur or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at what's happening at the moment with the whole Greg Wallace debate. And I mean, I think I put something on Twitter yesterday saying I haven't given my opinion because I don't have an opinion because how in the hell would
Gonna
I know?
gonna have to jump in to say who's Greg Wallace.
All right, so the dude from Master is it Master Chef? I don't watch Master Chef, but I've seen him on TV, the host, obviously, and he's been accused of all these sexual misconduct. And well, it's interesting. It started off from what I've seen in the news as he, made some bawdy jokes and was inappropriate at work. Now it's escalated into actual sexual, misconduct and asking people to do things and all of this. But I think the main thing is it's the media telling you stuff, and we know that they just lie nonstop. So how can you make a decision on a human being on stuff that's going to happen based on what they're saying? It could entirely be true. It could entirely be false. But how would I know? I can't know from what they're telling me. They've presented no evidence, just, someone saying this and he's saying this. There's no evidence. At least with the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing, you could watch the trial, see the evidence that was being presented. And obviously, you can make educated guesses and you get a feeling for these kind of things the more you understand it. But, you know, day one, when the claims were made against Greg Wallace, people were jumping on either saying, oh, he's completely innocent, leave him alone, or oh, he's completely guilty, hang him. How would you know? Like,
Well, completely. It's the redefinition of offence and crime, isn't it? Where like uh, as a TV guy, he is expected to not be the person that they employed him to be, which is a working class barrow boy
yeah,
who talks in this kind of way, which is not approved by the people. And eventually, 20 years into his career, they can him for this the bawdy jokes, which everybody hears all over the country all the time and don't really have a problem with it,
yeah,
except the whole country suddenly becomes his ex, and he gets canned.
yeah. I mean, the only interesting thing for me about it, because like I said, I don't have evidence, I don't know, so I'm not going to jump to any conclusions until I see some evidence, that gets presented, or he comes out admitting to all of it. Then I can, make a conclusion. But what's interesting is, people are saying, well, here's things he said, and they're showing clips of him saying these jokes to women. And these are the jokes being slammed, and they're saying this is completely inappropriate. Then they're showing clips of female presenters doing exactly the same thing or worse to male, contestants on shows or male celebrities that they're interviewing, and no one's batting an eyelid. But how can you have one rule for one person and not the same rule for someone else? Then it's just creating inequality by doing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, indeed, and that kind of comes back to the Lawrence Fox cancellation from GB News a couple of years ago, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Where Ava Santina of Politics Joe said he said on Dan Wootton's show I wouldn't shag her, and then that became somehow viral, and then it got back to the fact that she had been saying I wouldn't shag him to various other people online all the time on posts,
yeah,
and it was like the exact same thing they accuse you of in his terminology. It's just
yeah.
another media story, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean the media are, like I said, they're out for clicks and likes and how much following they can drum up. And I don't think I've ever read a story about this kind of thing, about allegations or whatever, that you can tell is 100% factual and is presenting evidence. It's always sensationalized, and as I say, people can't jump.
Exaggeration.
Yeah, people can't jump to conclusions. They have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, yes, totally.
Yeah,
Um, there's an interesting term in the men's rights, the manosphere, which is I find to be a very amusing term, but
yeah,
everyone seems to find it somehow toxic. I think it's funny. But men go their own way. MGTOW is
yeah.
an interesting and there's a big whole, there's a big old field. Do you have any opinion on men go their own way?
Yeah, I think, obviously there's a lot of guys out there now saying, oh, we're getting screwed over, and women are doing this and that, and we must do our own thing. And I personally don't buy into that, because I think the solution to all of these problems lie together. where if we can actually come together and have a proper discourse and agree on things, which is difficult, obviously, and it's going to take a lot of work. But I think, by just saying, okay, we'll just ignore you, it's not really going to fix the problem. It's just going to maybe hide away from it, and maybe by all these men kind of walking away and not lending their voices to trying to find equality, it actually maybe is a negative thing. So I don't agree with kind of saying, oh, we must, again, it's not all women. So why would you walk away from all women? Because you know
Mm.
it's bad women and it's bad men. It's not one or the other.
Yeah, that's the reality of, isn't it?
Yeah,
That so I don't know about your life, but in mine, I've got many women in it who are just like totally non issued, just very normal people who have complete bafflement about all of this culture war or
yeah,
all of the things that we're discussing. Bafflement and a lot of hostility towards, false accusers and just people weaponizing their position, basically.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and um,
exactly.
and it's like they're trying to understand what's going on there, and they care about you as a human being, not as necessarily a man, and then they kind of go, how come you don't hate them all? It's like, it's not about hating them all.
Yeah,
uh, what I'm about is about the systems that support them, which is the media and the justice system. These, when they become systematically misandrist, which there's increasing evidence that they do, we're
yep.
in bigger trouble. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, there's one or two that you can look at and think, okay, they're not exactly nice people, and they're really stoking the fire of a lot of us, like the Charlotte Proudmans and of the world. But yeah, in general, it's not a case of women are bad, men are bad. It's a case of things that there were problems that needed fixing where women weren't treated right, and they needed fixing, and they got fixed. But now there's been an overcorrection in a lot of areas, and now we kind of need to get back to middle ground. And what's interesting for me is obviously I went through what I went through for a long time, over a decade, but I've moved on. I'm in a new relationship. My fiance went through everything herself from the other way,
Mm.
and what's interesting is she looks at it and goes, I can't believe how bad men have it. I can't believe the way you get treated and the stuff that's happening, and she's been on the other side of it as well. So
Well,
it's yeah, I think any decent person who's willing to look at it logically and calmly can see that, oh, hang on, there is there is something happening here systemically. It's not about people, it's about the system. It's about family courts, the police, the judges, the what charities get given funding every year, things like that. The reporting of stats. Those are the things that need to be corrected.
yeah, yeah. And the part that if you point out the lack of equality in it, the lack of equanimity, you get called whataboutery, and that because you're in the reactionary position. It hasn't occurred
Yeah,
to men to come out with all this stuff. So everything that we do is in a reaction to what they're doing. So you're automatically reactionary, which is not a position I find very comfortable. I like doing things in a creative way, not in a
yeah,
reactive way. But they have forced this, so you're
yeah.
in the position of going, no, but.
But it's also like if you look at it like men, let's say men have been trained over the years to be stoic, not talk about their problems, suck it up, man up. War came and men had to be, they went through horrors with war, but it was about keeping quiet. You don't talk about your problems to your family, and men for generations have been taught that that's the way to be. So now when we get to this kind of crisis we're having with men not being able to speak up about being abused or whatever. It's like, well, it's no wonder because you've been told don't speak up, men tough it out. I've written this new book that's coming out. It's called Misandry: The War on Men Uncovered, and it's all about this, about how this is how society's been trained. This is how things like the gender pay gap and other myths. How men have been taught to be a certain way. How school systems failing men. How it covers everything. It was a labor. I'd say it's a labor of love. It was a labor of research. um,
Mm,
but yeah, it's these things need correcting. And I think, like I said, I had coffee with a mate earlier and he opened up to me and he told me about this stuff. and he actually ended up crying because I didn't judge him or anything. I just listened to him and said, "Okay, obviously I understand." Um, and we went through it, and he was scared to open up. I mean, when I wrote my first book, I remember a lot of guys who I trained with at the gym, and these are big, big guys. About 10 of them came up to me and said, "Yeah, me too. This happened to me." And you know, and it's a lot more prevalent than people think. So when you say domestic abuse, people just think, okay, it's a man hitting a woman. They don't think that, oh, actually, it's someone hitting someone, or someone, not even necessarily hitting, someone controlling someone, emotionally abusing someone. So that narrative just needs to shift. That domestic abuse is bad. It doesn't matter if it's against a man or a woman. It's bad.
It's absolutely. And every time that you see a posting from the Ministry of Justice, every day they come out, or the civil service, um, domestic abuse, domestic violence, and it's always against women, and that's the framing, that's the constant framing, as if the Deptford thing doesn't matter and never happened to them, of course, and
Yeah,
as if Jess Phillips, for example, for an easy example, not to pick on her, but for an easy example, will always frame the thing in this kind of trauma-informed woe or us way, without. And if you mention men, and the first thing that they ever do is dismiss it and sort of minimize it. They don't say it doesn't exist. They sort of go, yes, it's very, very, very rare. And then you go, it's not rare. It's 50-50. They just don't report it. It doesn't
yeah,
get talked about, and God knows it doesn't get prosecuted. And by the way, we generally don't want the partners to be prosecuted. They're very controversial, but I can totally get why someone wouldn't want their partner prosecuted, right?
yeah,
And that's been the same way backwards for women for
yeah,
decades,
yeah,
until they just started happily going out there and prosecuting. So it
yeah.
seems.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, take official statistics, right? So we're talking official Office of National Statistics shows that on average in the UK every year it's like 750,000, some figure around there, 750 or 760,000 men get abused. Under that is their second statistic of only 28% of men report. Okay, so let's do some basic maths. It's a quarter, so that's 2.8 million men a year. How can you ignore something that is affecting 2.8 million people in the population every year? Happily ignore it, downplay it, not interested. But to me, it's this political agenda, and it comes down to money, right? It's about people like Women's Aid, and they're driving this narrative that men are evil, women are abused, men aren't. Give us all the funding. If you talk about men, you're clearly a misogynist. Um, yeah, it's just such a terrible, terrible narrative. It just lacks human decency, basically.
It's incredible, obviously very valuable work that you're doing for exactly the reasons you just said. As we pull to a close, not quite,
Yeah,
um, Mr. Donald Trump has just been elected for a second time on the other side of the pond. Putting any other politics aside, which our viewers will no doubt be 50-50 on it, like the entire rest of the world, um, it means something different for abused men, doesn't it?
yeah. Look, I'll say up front, and I know I'll get a lot of stick for this. I don't like Donald Trump at all, as a person. Personally, I do think the fact that they are looking at a lot more work around men and a lot more focus on that, and him and Elon Musk are talking a lot more about this kind of thing out loud a lot on Twitter and stuff like that. I do think it's very good for men. So the benefit of having him there is very good for American men, and hopefully that you know echoes through global changes with people seeing this happen. Um, yeah, I think it was for me, it was kind of a lose-lose election in terms of personal, in terms of the person being elected. But yeah, good for men.
Mm-hmm. And he's kind of reflecting in what we're seeing right now with Javier Milei in Argentina,
Yeah.
who's actually doing very different. He's actually explained what's happening in Argentina.
Yes, I mean Argentina's kind of leading the way, aren't they, with changing the laws and the kind of again policies around it, especially around things like false accusations, clamping down on it. Um, First of all, I mean just the fact that they're acknowledging that it exists, which obviously we in the UK do not acknowledge that this exists. It's always quoted as a very few and far between thing. Um, But yeah, it's amazing what they're doing, and hopefully that again that echoes through the world. And if Trump and America can pick up on that, that should hold some sway globally because obviously they're the biggest, most in-your-face nation. So hopefully that really does have a good sway on the world of men.
Absolutely. Is there anything that you would like to pass on to our viewers as you get this little platform chance?
No, look, I think main thing for me is, and I say this on all my kind of YouTubes and in my books, is for a lot of guys going through stuff like domestic abuse, false allegations, that you don't know anything about it until it happens to you. And then when it does happen to you, you don't know where to turn, right? And I was in that boat. I had no idea there were such things as male charities or male support groups because you just don't see them. They're not in the mainstream media. They're not billboarded up like Women's Aid is. So, there are people out there who can help. Look out for it. People are more than welcome to always contact me on social media or via my website. I end up taking a lot of calls with guys around the world that I've never met in my entire life, but who just need someone to talk to and understand what's going on. So there are people out there who will talk to you, will help you. There are organizations that are good to talk to. Just look for them. They're there.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, if you want to get hold of Jared, you can possibly go to X. You can see it written there, and they got some factual stuff as well, right? So
Yeah.
and they've got the new one coming out as you've just been talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on ETI TV, Jared, and
Yeah. Brilliant.
we'll be keeping up with you on everything that you do in future.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. Thanks, Sean, and thanks
Right.
for all the good work you do.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Bye bye.